What would you think if I told you there was a book so drenched in the raw blood of the unconscious, so soaked in forbidden truths, that even Carl Jung, who spent a lifetime peering into the abyss, locked it away for years, afraid of what it would reveal, not about the world, but about you? This was no ordinary manuscript. It wasn't theory or philosophy. It was invocation, a spiritual weapon, a map of madness and resurrection. And within it, like inked ghosts trapped on crimson pages, were the parts of yourself you've been trained to deny. The polite mask you wear, the smile that conceals resentment, the perfection that hides the storm. Jung called it the persona, a role, a performance, a fragile decoy. But behind that mask, in the forbidden chamber of your psyche, waits the shadow. Not evil, not broken, simply exiled. Everything that made you too much, too angry, too sexual, too visionary, too wild, too aware. Most women have never truly met their shadow. Not fully. They've glimpsed her in jealousy, in sudden bursts of rage, in inconvenient longing, in the split second before self-sabotage. And then she's tucked away again, silenced, controlled, out of sight. Because that's what we're taught, isn't it? That to be desirable, you must be agreeable. To be loved, you must be soft. To be safe, you must be small. But what Jung unearthed, what he dared to ink into that book, was a truth so ancient and blinding, it threatened the very scaffolding of civilized selfhood. You cannot become whole until you've danced with your darkness. He called it individuation, not healing in the modern soothing sense, but a confrontation, an ordeal, a spiral descent into your own underworld. You see, the journey toward empowerment is not paved with affirmations. It is paved with archetypes, with betrayal, with resistance, and with the audacity to say, this, too, is me. You've felt her before, haven't you? That version of you who doesn't beg to be chosen but demands to be reckoned with. She's not polite. She doesn't wait to be asked. She walks into rooms heavy with presence and leaves them restructured. But she's been buried under years of conditioning, shame, and ancestral silence. And here's the ache of it all. The shadow is not the enemy. She's the guardian of your power. Jung's dangerous book whispered this, that what repels you holds your freedom, that the parts of you you most fear are the exact keys to your becoming, and that until you face them, you are not living. You are merely maintaining. Let this sink in. Your chronic people-pleasing? That's your unmet rage, dressed in politeness. Your anxiety? A misfired instinct screaming that you've abandoned your truth? That attraction to emotionally unavailable men? That's your inner masculine, fractured and projected, asking to be reclaimed. The fear of being alone? It's not fear of solitude. It's the terror of meeting yourself unmasked. But imagine, just for a moment, what it would mean to turn toward that inner wilderness, to sit with her, that untamed force, and ask, what have I exiled that was mine to wield? This is not self-help. This is self-initiation. Jung knew the shadow doesn't go away. It waits. And if ignored too long, it doesn't whisper anymore. It erupts in your relationships, in your dreams, in the patterns that repeat like karmic echoes, until you finally stop asking, why is this happening to me? And instead ask, what part of me created this? And when you ask that, everything changes. Because the woman who makes contact with her shadow does not beg for love. She doesn't chase closure. She doesn't fear being misunderstood. She radiates a different frequency, one that cannot be manipulated because it is rooted in the raw truth of her being. The world may call her intimidating, but the wise call her integrated. This is the woman the book was written for. Not the faint of heart, but the one who's tired of performing, the one who feels the tremor in her chest when she hears the word truth, the one who suspects, no, who knows, that she was meant for something deeper than survival. Carl Jung didn't publish this book for the masses. He wrote it in silence, in exile, in madness, because the truths it contained were never meant to be consumed. They were meant to be lived. So if you've made it this far, if your breath caught somewhere between the lines, if something ancient stirred, then maybe, just maybe, you're ready. There is a moment, sacred and terrifying, when a woman realizes that everything she blamed on the outside world was a mirror, that the rejection wasn't just from lovers or friends, but from herself, that the chaos wasn't simply circumstantial, but ancestral, archetypal, embedded in her psyche like an ancient spell. This moment does not arrive politely. It crashes through uninvited, like a storm that ruins your carefully decorated life. And yet, that is the moment the shadow has been waiting for. Not to punish you, but to awaken you. The book Carl Jung locked away for years was not dangerous because of demons. It was dangerous because it revealed how many of your own demons were projections, unclaimed truths you cast onto others to avoid the unbearable intimacy of owning them. Every judgment you've ever made of another woman's freedom was about your fear of claiming your own. Every time you obsessed over a man who withheld affection, you were reenacting the myth of Psyche, chasing Eros into the night, unaware that your true hunger was to unite with your own masculine principle, the one that acts, decides, penetrates life with purpose. In the pages of Jung's Red Book, Symbols Bleed and God's Whisper, the feminine is not passive. She is the chaos that births cosmos. She is the womb and the fire. But for too long, society tried to split her into the good girl and the wild woman, the wife and the witch, the muse and the monster. And you've tried to be what they wanted. You've starved parts of yourself to feed their comfort. But hunger never disappears. It mutates. It becomes addiction, obsession, insecurity, control. Yet beneath every compulsive attachment, there is a holy wound. And that wound holds the shape of your forgotten self. Most women, when betrayed, retreat. They spiral. They question their worth. But the woman who has met her shadow does something different. She watches. She does not collapse. She observes the betrayal like a high priestess reading smoke. She knows, this is not about him. This is about the part of me I haven't integrated yet. Do you see it now? You were never asking for love. You were asking for permission to be whole. And love, true love, is not something you receive when you become perfect. It is what magnetizes to you when you stop apologizing for being powerful. This is the secret behind obsession. Not love, not chemistry, not fate, but a disowned archetype calling you home through another person's eyes. He seems intoxicating, not because he holds your future, but because he triggers your past. Your father wound, your abandonment wound, your inner masculine that still thinks it has to earn approval. But when you look at him clearly, without projection, he fades. The spell breaks. And what remains is you, with yourself, your beauty, your rage, your capacity to burn and bless in the same breath. This is what the dangerous book reveals, that the quest for love was never about finding someone. It was about reuniting with what was lost in you. And once you've reclaimed her, your wildness, your rage, your sacred feminine fire, you no longer chase, you magnetize. You no longer audition, you command. Because power doesn't scream, it radiates. Women who do this work are not loud. They are unmistakable. Jung understood that the psyche is not a straight line. It's a labyrinth. To walk it is to descend, to fail, to shatter. But each time you fall, a mask is removed. And beneath each mask is a truth so feral, so beautiful, that no man, no institution, no trauma can take it from you. You begin to realize you're not broken. You're becoming. You're not too much. You're a mirror for the parts of others they're too afraid to face. You're not unlovable. You're just finally loving yourself more than the illusion of belonging. And so the question is no longer, will they choose me? But will I choose to no longer betray myself? That's the heart of the shadow. It doesn't want to destroy you. It wants to liberate you. But first, it must destroy who you were told to be. If you're still here, reading these words with something burning behind your ribs, then you already know this is not entertainment. This is initiation. And initiation always begins with a rupture, a heartbreak, a breakdown. That's not failure. That's the door. Are you ready to walk through? There is a point in every woman's path where the masks crack, not with a bang, but with a silence so deep it feels like drowning. It's in that silence where the shadow speaks most clearly. Not with words, but with memory. An ache behind the ribs. A flash of an old betrayal. A scene replayed in dreams. You feel it not with your mind, but with your body. Because the body remembers what the ego worked hard to forget. You've felt it, haven't you? That obsessive hunger for the unavailable man. The deep-rooted need to be seen by the one who will not look. The craving to be chosen by the one who walks away. But obsession isn't love. It's a symptom of the self abandoning itself again. A reenactment of old wounds masquerading as destiny. Carl Jung called it projection. But it's more than that. It's a spiritual loop where your unhealed parts dance in someone else's behavior. You think you're chasing connection, but you're actually chasing yourself, the part of you were taught to exile. You weren't born obsessing over love. You were taught that being loved was your worth, that being wanted was your currency, that being chosen validated your existence. But this illusion collapses when the shadow rises, and it always rises. Some women fear this collapse, and they run. They become masters of performance, smiling, nurturing, desirable, but empty. Others numb. They pour themselves into work, perfection, distraction, but a few, very few, do the opposite. They stop running. They sit with the discomfort. They look into the eyes of their obsession and say, "Show me what I've been unwilling to feel." And that, right there, is where the alchemy begins. Because if you stay, you'll see something that will change everything. The man you're obsessed with, he's not a god. He's a mirror of your disowned masculine, of your fear of power, of your belief that only through another can you access your magic. But your magic has never needed permission. The shadow whispers this as you weep on the floor, not because you're weak, but because you're finally soft enough to hear the truth. You are not here to beg for love. You are here to remember who you are. And remembering hurts. It rips through illusions like fire through paper. It shows you how many times you said yes when your soul screamed no. How many times you made yourself small to keep the peace. How many times you loved others hoping they'd do what you couldn't. Love yourself enough to leave the table when crumbs were all that was served. Do you feel it? This is not heartbreak. This is rebirth. The woman who rises from obsession is not the same woman who fell into it. She's sharper, softer, wilder, clearer. She doesn't chase anymore, not because she's cold, but because she remembers. She remembers the feeling of abandoning herself to be accepted. She remembers the high of being chosen and the crash that always came after. She remembers what it cost her to forget her own voice. And she is done paying. This woman walks differently. She speaks less. But when she does, The room goes still. Not because she demands attention, but because her presence is truth. Not all will like her. Many will fear her. Some will desire her without understanding why, but she no longer shrinks for comfort. Because the shadow has done its work. It has dismantled the princess myth. It has burned the fantasy of salvation. It has ended the obsession with being loved. And in its place, it has carved something indestructible, self-possession. Now, when a man arrives, she doesn't ask, "Will he choose me?" She asks, "Is he worthy of meeting me here, in this sovereignty, in this fire, in this depth?" And if he cannot meet her, she lets him walk. No drama, no collapse, no obsession. Because once the shadow is integrated, the compulsion to repeat the wound dies. This is not theory. This is blood truth. And you feel it. In your bones. In your breath. In the way you are starting to no longer flinch when he ghosts you. When he pulls away. When he withholds. Not because it doesn't hurt, but because you finally know that his absence says nothing about your value. And this knowing, it's everything. So the question is not, how do I stop obsessing? The question is, am I willing to feel what the obsession was hiding? Because on the other side of that feeling is freedom so fierce, it will terrify those still asleep. But not you, you're waking up. And once you wake, you cannot return. That's the silent terror of transformation. There is no undoing it. You can no longer tolerate what once thrilled you, no longer cling to what once sustained you. The same games that once sparked your adrenaline now feel like poison in your throat. And you'll try, oh, you'll try, to shrink again, to laugh at the shallow jokes, to pretend the crumbs are enough. But your soul will revolt. Your body will reject what no longer aligns. Your skin will crawl in the presence of falseness. This is the sacred discomfort of becoming. When the veil lifts, you start to see the invisible contracts you signed, the unconscious vows you made to be pleasing, palatable, predictable. You remember being taught to be low maintenance, to take up less space, need less, ask for nothing. You were told that this is what makes a woman lovable, but it was a lie. A beautifully packaged, culturally reinforced lie. Carl Jung wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And for many women, obsession was the disguise of fate, the seductive lie that he was meant for you, that the pain had purpose, that if you could just prove your worth, the story would change. But you were never meant to earn love. You were meant to be love. Radiant. Self-sourced. Undeniable. The obsession is what happens when you've forgotten your radiance and mistake his rejection for proof of your inadequacy. But rejection, when seen through the lens of the shadow, is redirection. Not from love, but from illusion. From scripts not yours. From patterns passed down by generations of women who were praised for staying silent, adored for their sacrifice, and shamed for their strength. Now you carry their inheritance, but you get to decide whether to pass it on. It is not enough to simply understand this. You must embody it. You must let it sink into your skin, into your movement, into your voice. When you walk into a room, you must know you belong, not because someone else validates you, but because you are no longer waiting to be allowed. This is the essence of feminine individuation, not separation from men, but separation from the dependency on them for identity. And this is dangerous, not because you'll end up alone, but because you'll end up sovereign. And a sovereign woman cannot be manipulated. She cannot be gaslit. She cannot be seduced by temporary attention because she no longer runs on the currency of validation. She no longer performs. She no longer proves. She no longer pleads. Because she has seen what happens when the anima, the feminine soul within, is denied. She has seen the cost of twisting herself into shapes just to be desired. and she has decided that she would rather be alone in her truth than adored in her illusion. This is not a phase. This is a return to the original self, the one who existed before the world told her who to be. And when you arrive here, the men you attract will change. The mirror shifts. The reflections become clearer. You'll no longer draw in the ones who need you to dim your light. Instead, you'll draw in those who see your fire and are not afraid to burn with you. But you'll also notice something else. You won't need them. You'll want them, perhaps, deeply, passionately. But the difference between obsession and desire is sovereignty. Obsession says, without you, I am nothing. Desire says, with or without you, I am whole. So when he doesn't text back, you don't spiral. When he pulls away, you don't chase. When he withholds affection, you don't beg. Not because you don't care, but because you care about yourself more. This isn't cruelty, this is clarity. You've spent too long in emotional purgatory, too long letting your nervous system be hijacked by breadcrumbs, too long giving goddess energy to men still living in boyhood. Now you choose differently, not because you've hardened, but because you've healed. This is what the shadow teaches when you dare to face it. It teaches you that your obsession was never about him. It was always about you, your longing, your wounds, your forgotten power. And now, you remember? You begin to feel it before you can name it. The subtle, seismic shift in your center of gravity. Where once your emotions revolved around him, now they orbit something older, deeper, unshakable. Yourself. Not the self you presented in dating profiles or performed in the glow of male attention, but the untamed, unfiltered presence that was buried beneath years of conditioning and polite acquiescence. She is rising now, and she is not asking for permission. This is the moment Jung called enantiodromia, the turning of tides, when extremes birth their opposites, where the girl who once lived for his every glance becomes the woman who barely flinches at his silence. The woman who once performed contortionist acts to win scraps of affection now walks away at the first sign of dissonance, not out of arrogance, but out of reverence for the sacred energy she finally recognizes as hers. She no longer mistakes pain for proof of love. She no longer needs the ache to feel alive. What she craved in him was always the reflection of her own dormant wholeness. His passion, his power, his mystery, those were not his gifts to offer. They were her soul's forgotten languages. And now, as she reclaims them, the spell is broken. Not because he changed, but because she did. Obsession dies when identity is restored. But do not mistake this quiet power for coldness. No, her heart still aches, but now it aches for truth, not for fantasy. Her longing has not disappeared. It has been refined, elevated, no longer aimed at the unavailable or the withholding, but directed inward, toward the sacred task of becoming fully alive. And what a dangerous woman that makes her. Dangerous not because she wounds, but because she won't be wounded for sport anymore. She won't entertain the boy who confuses possession with love. She won't flirt with the ghost of who he could be. She sees the gap between potential and reality, and she refuses to fall into it. She is not interested in fixing. She is not interested in waiting. She is not here to audition for love. She has remembered her divine entitlement to it. And here, the shadow softens. No longer a monster in the basement, but a messenger. It whispers of boundaries and brilliance, of standards that rise with every revelation. It shows her the parts of herself she gave away for comfort, and beckons her to reclaim them, no matter the cost. This is not a gentle journey. It will rip you from your fantasies. It will demand you grieve the version of you who tolerated what now repulses you. But it will also free you. You were not meant to be liked by everyone. You were meant to be loved by the right one. And first, that one must be you. This is the philosophy of Stoics and mystics alike, that peace is not found in the approval of others, but in the alignment with truth. As Seneca said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." You are proving yourself now, not to a man, not to society, but to your soul. You are becoming her. The woman who pauses before she replies, not out of calculation, but because her voice is too precious to be wasted. The woman who meets manipulation with silence and charm with scrutiny. The woman who does not flinch when called too much, too intense, or too emotional, because she knows that these are just projections from men too small to hold what she contains. And what she contains is fire. But it is not just destructive, it is creative. It births a new kind of romance, one not based on roles or rules, but on resonance. One where the masculine meets her not to dominate, but to witness. Where love is not a test she must pass, but a temple where she is worshipped, because she no longer worships false idols. And yes, this path will make you lonely before it makes you luminous, because when you rise, you leave behind the crowd. When you wake, you can no longer sleep beside those still dreaming. But solitude is not emptiness. It is preparation. It is sacred space for the arrival of the one who sees you not as a conquest, but as a queen. And until then, you are enough, entire, worthy of your own gaze. No obsession, no chasing, no settling, only truth. And then she turns the final page, not of his story, but of hers, the one she kept rewriting every time he left, every time he grew cold, every time he shattered her certainty with that familiar silence. She used to live in the ache between the words, in the quiet despair of his ambiguity. But now, the silence no longer screams. It hums, like a prelude to rebirth. She has stepped out of the labyrinth. Gone is the girl who lived on breadcrumbs, who measured her worth by the way he looked at her across the room. Gone is the woman who confused intensity with intimacy. She knows now that a man can burn brightly and still leave her in the dark. That charm can be the mask of the emotionally unavailable. That some men do not want a partner, they want a projection screen for their own ego, and she will no longer play that part. Not because she has hardened, but because she has softened, inward, toward herself. The shadow no longer whispers self-doubt. It now speaks in the language of sovereignty. You do not have to abandon yourself to be loved. She repeats it until it's etched into her bones. She is not difficult. She is discerning. She is not high maintenance. She is highly aware. She is not too much. She is finally whole. The dangerous book, the one Jung warned us about, is not merely filled with pages. It is the one written in our blood, in our childhoods, in the emotional scars passed down through generations. It is the book of the unconscious, the record of every abandonment you made of yourself to be accepted. And now, as she reads it with open eyes, she weeps. But these are not tears of sorrow. They are tears of reunion, of return, because she remembers the little girl who dimmed her light so others wouldn't feel small. The teenager who learned that pleasing was safer than honesty. The young woman who tolerated too much because she thought that's what love required. All of them, versions of her, stand now in the same sacred circle, watching her rise. She no longer punishes herself for being fooled. That was never her failure. Her failure would have been to stay fooled, but she didn't. She woke up, and that awakening is not a single moment. It is a series of choices, painful, poetic, powerful. To leave when she wants to stay, to confront when she wants to appease, to speak when she wants to shrink, to feel when she wants to numb. She knows now that the shadow is not something to defeat. It is something to dance with. Because the part of her that once obsessed was not crazy. It was unclaimed. The obsession was never about him. It was about the wound he activated, the mirror he held, the power she projected onto him that was hers all along. And when that clicks, when she sees him not as the epicenter of her longing, but as the catalyst of her return, he loses his grip. Not because he lets go, but because she no longer clings. The hooks fall out, the cord dissolves, the chemistry cools, and all that remains is clarity. She was always the one she was waiting for. In the words of Marcus Aurelius, the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. And her thoughts are no longer consumed with what he's thinking, doing, or feeling. They are consumed with the life she's creating, the purpose she's embodying, the woman she is becoming. A woman who is not afraid of her fire, because she knows how to contain it. A woman who doesn't ask, "Why didn't he choose me?" but instead whispers, "Thank God he didn't." A woman who knows that the man who cannot hold her darkness does not deserve her light. She walks now with a different rhythm. She laughs with her whole chest. She no longer performs for love. She is love, emanating in every step. And if a man dares to enter her orbit, he must come correct. Not as a savior, not as a fantasy, but as a sovereign being who has faced his own shadows. Because she no longer makes homes in broken mirrors. She builds altars in her own image. This is the gift of the dangerous book. Not the knowledge it contains, but the knowing it awakens. Not the answers, but the courage to ask better questions. Like, who am I when I'm no longer chasing? What do I become when I stop begging for breadcrumbs? And how powerful is the woman who stops asking for love and starts being it? She is here now, and nothing will ever be the same. ChatGPT Gen Noi. The air around her is different now, thicker with truth, thinner with illusion. She no longer needs the world to bend to her wounds. The ache is still there, yes, but it no longer owns her. It sings quietly, like a distant echo of a life she outgrew. The woman who once broke herself into fragments so others could digest her in manageable bites has become whole. She no longer shrinks for comfort. She expands for truth. And this truth is ancient. It whispers through the veins of every woman who ever felt invisible, while screaming silently inside. It drips from the ink of Carl Jung's revelations and pours into the spaces between breath and breakdown, between falling and rising. Individuation is not glamorous. It is not an aesthetic. It is death and rebirth inside the same hour. It is becoming conscious of your unconscious while your world collapses, because that world was never built on your terms. It was built on conditioning, on fear, on silence, on pleasing. But now, she doesn't want to be liked. She wants to be free. And freedom demands grief. Grief for the woman she pretended to be. Grief for the love she made excuses for. Grief for the years spent explaining herself to people committed to misunderstanding her. This grief, raw and raging, is her midwife. It delivers her to the next version of herself, not softer, not quieter, but more exact. She no longer loves with desperation. She loves with discernment. She no longer asks, "Does he want me?" She asks, "Do I want him, his nervous system, his soul structure, his shadow work?" Because she knows now, attraction without alignment is a trauma bond. Chemistry is not clarity. Intensity is not intimacy. She reads the energy beneath the words, the tremble behind the charm, the absence behind the attention. And if she sees a man still possessed by the ghost of his mother's approval, or drowning in the echo of a father wound he won't name, she does not stay and fix. She blesses and exits. Her empathy is no longer for rent. She can hold space, yes, but she will not hold him up if he's committed to falling. That is not cruelty. That is clarity. That is compassion with boundaries. And boundaries are how a woman tells the world, "My soul is sacred ground." Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And so, she made a vow to dig, to bleed, to remember, to rewrite, to feel everything that once terrified her. Not because she enjoys pain, but because she no longer wants to live a life dictated by what she refuses to face. This is why some men feared her, not because she was too emotional, but because she saw too much. She saw through the performance, through the smile that didn't reach his eyes, through the "I love you" that sounded like manipulation wrapped in romance. She didn't flinch when he disappeared. She didn't chase when he breadcrumbed. She watched, took note, and made her exit with grace so lethal it should have come with a warning label. Because now she no longer waits for closure. She creates it. She no longer hopes he'll return. She hopes she never forgets what she survived. The woman who has done her shadow work doesn't go back. She honors the pain, integrates the lesson, and carries on, lighter, clearer, stronger. The old her might have clung. This version, she chooses. And that choice, over and over again, to choose herself, even when it hurts, even when it's lonely, even when the world says, try harder, that is her revolution. She is not perfect, but she is real. And real women don't seek to be understood. They seek to be aligned with truth, with depth, with the divine unfolding of their own psyche. She doesn't need a savior, she needs a witness. A man who doesn't flinch at her fire or flee from her silence. A man who doesn't fall in love with her mask but stands in awe of her essence. And if he never comes, she is not lesser. She is not incomplete. She is not unfinished. She is her own culmination. She walks now not to arrive anywhere, but to feel her feet on the ground, solid, sovereign, unapologetically her own. She no longer moves through life seeking permission. She moves through life as an invocation. Each step echoes with the wisdom of women who learned the hard way. The world will not hand you your worth. You must claim it. With trembling hands if you must, but claim it nonetheless. The book she read, the dangerous one, the one too many fear to open, did not just speak of archetypes and shadows. It was not simply philosophy. It was prophecy. A mirror she had been avoiding for years. Carl Jung had not written it to soothe. He wrote it to awaken. An awakening is brutal before it is beautiful. She now understands why so many reject the process, why they mock, why they numb, why they distract with drama or pleasure or perfectionism. Because to truly wake up means letting die every identity that once kept you safe. It means standing naked before the mirror of your past and saying, "This was me, wounded, reactive, reaching, but no longer." The woman who was once addicted to being needed is now addicted to being free. Her inner child no longer runs the show. The adult in her has arrived, steady, tender, fierce. And she's building a life not around who she used to be, but around who she's becoming. There's a strange silence that comes after the storm of inner work, a sacred stillness. It's not loneliness, it's liberation. It's the absence of the voices that once lived rent-free in her mind, the critics, the doubters, the ghosts of men who only loved the parts of her that didn't threaten their control. They've been evicted, and in their place, space. Space for truth, for art, for joy that doesn't ask for validation, for solitude that feels like sanctuary. But don't mistake her peace for passivity. Don't mistake her softness for submission. She still roars. She still burns. She still demands. But now she doesn't direct it outward. She doesn't wage war with the world. She aligns her fire inward, toward creation, toward embodiment, toward legacy. Because the real revolution is not in being louder. It's in being clearer. Clarity cuts deeper than rage, and she is razor sharp now, No longer will she be distracted by potential in a man who can't meet her in presence. She doesn't fall for potential. She listens to patterns. She observes nervous systems. She watches how his shadow behaves when he's told no. She knows now, you don't need to raise a man. You need to recognize one. And if he hasn't faced himself, he cannot face her. She is not here to complete him. She is here to walk beside him. If, and only if, he too has entered the cave of his own undoing and returned with humility, not entitlement. Her power no longer lies in how many people admire her, but in how little she needs to be admired at all. Let them call her too much, too deep, too intense, too analytical, too emotional. She will smile, because she is not here to fit in your comfort zone. She is here to make unconsciousness conscious, to make the unseen felt, to make the silence speak. And when she speaks now, she does not beg to be heard. Her voice is not desperate. It is declarative. It is ancestral. It is not asking for a place at the table. It is building an altar. And on that altar lies everything she gave up to become this woman. The fantasy, the fixation, the fragments of herself she once handed out like sacrificial offerings just to be loved a little longer. No more. The dangerous book didn't just reveal too much. It revealed enough. Enough to wake her. Enough to break the trance. Enough to set fire to the lies and walk barefoot through the ashes into a life that feels like truth. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase. She chooses.